City University Television presents the American Theater Wing Seminars. Working in the theater. This seminar, production.
Welcome to the American Theater Wing's Working in the Theater Seminars, now in the 29th year, coming to you from the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. Today's seminar is devoted to the production of the exciting Broadway musical, Mamma Mia. With the members of its creative and production teams, we will follow the show from its beginning as a work for the stage through to the current production now on Broadway. Although we are holding this seminar not long after the tragedy of September 11th, we've asked our panelists not to dwell on those horrible events as we look to the future. I'm Isabel Stevenson, Chairman of the Board of the American Theater Wing. I think this seminar will give us all great insight into the creative process that leads to the long road to Broadway. And now, with great pleasure, let me introduce our moderator for the seminar, a veteran Broadway producer himself and president of the American Theater Wing, Roy A. Sumleo. Roy.
Thank you, Isabel. I'm very pleased to be amongst this prestigious panel. Let me introduce them to you. These are the creators of Mamma Mia. On my far right is Björn Ulvaeus, who is the co-author of the book, of the music and the lyrics, and a producer of Mamma Mia. Next to me is Phyllida Lloyd. Phyllida is the director. And on my left is Judy Craymer, producer of Mamma Mia. Next to her is Adrian Bryan-Brown, who's the publicist. And next to him is Katherine Johnson, who wrote the book of this juggernaut that is happening in New York and around the world. The logical, as Isabel Stevenson said, we're going to trace this from its beginning. I want to go, in fact, more than just at the beginning of it as a Broadway show. I wanted to go back to the beginning of Mamma Mia, and I think we start the question with Björn. Would you tell us the very birth of Mamma Mia?
Well, 25 years ago, when I
wrote
some of these songs, I didn't have any idea that they had a theatrical quality in any way. So at that time, we were just trying to write as good pop songs as possible. And this was noticed by Judy, who can actually tell you the birth, because she came up with the idea.
What a responsibility. Well, I'd always loved Abba's songs, and in 1982 I met Benny Andersson and Björn Ulvaeus, and had the pleasure and fun of working with them as their executive producer on Chess. And had always thought there was something very theatrical about those songs. But it was far too early then for Björn and Benny to even consider returning to the Abba music. Abba as a band had disbanded in 1982, so it was about 1989 when I seriously approached them. And they were very encouraging and smiled sweetly and possibly thought I was a little mad. And they had other projects. They were working on their very huge project, Christina musical in Sweden. And I kind of toyed with several ideas. It started off as a film, television idea. And then probably about 5 years ago, I said, you know, let's really go for this and do it as a stage musical. And Benny and Björn said, well, if you can find the right story, yes, we'll seriously think about it. So
could I interrupt you just there? For the benefit of anybody who might have been living in a cave for the last 30 years, I'd like to, we mentioned Abba, and that's really where I'd like you to begin, and we'll hold it now up to the last 5 years. But tell about Abba. And
Abba is a pop group from Sweden. 4 members, 2 couples we used to be, actually, although we got divorced right in the middle of our career. But we won the Eurovision Song Contest in 1974, and that overnight sort of opened the world to us. And we had a career between, I would say, 73 and 81 when we split up because we felt the energy has gone out of the group. And Benny and I wanted to go into theater anyway. We have people say, I don't know whether this is true, but they say that we've sold 350 million records.
Have you been paid for them? You'll know.
I don't think for all of them. But that's where we are. And during those 7-8 years, that was our career, we wrote about 12 songs a year. And I guess had about 2 or 3 hits a year as well, all around the world. So that's where Judy's sort of base comes from.
But you and Benny are the two Bs.
Yes.
In your
Agneta and Annie Fried are the two A's.
And the other artists were and you did the music and lyrics, and they did the vocals.
Yeah, absolutely. They would sing the singers.
Right.
We were the writers and producers.
Did you
although
sing?
part of the
Didn't you
group.
sing in the group?
I did sing too. Yes. I used to get 1 track on each album.
So, you're a Swedish group, and do all the rock groups sing in English in Sweden? I mean,
It was very natural for us to do that, because having been exposed to American and English rock for such a long time, we realized that English is the language of pop. And in order to reach outside Sweden anyway, Swedish is such a funny language. We had to do it in English. Do you want to hear some Swedish?
Yes. Can you say Abba in Swedish?
Abba.
We all know some Swedish now.
Oh, yeah.
I
That's
think
all
that-
you need to know.
I think now I'll let you go back to your story about having selected from the ABBA, where you went from there.
Having starved for many years. So, well, many years went by, and still encouragement from Sweden, but still no commitment. And I had a very sad life sitting on my apartment floor listening to ABBA songs endlessly. And
That was about 5 years.
it was about 5 years.
Yeah.
And there are about 90, I think, even though we use 22. But I knew, Winner Takes It All, which is my favourite song, was the big inspiration to me. And I knew that was a very theatrical song in its own right. Also, Björn wrote great lyrics that were very accessible and revealed relationships that I was kind of fascinated to know the stories behind. I also felt that the songs fell into 2 generations. There were the younger ABBA songs, the kind of Honey Honeys and the Dancing Queens, and the more mature emotional songs like Winner Takes It All and Knowing Me, Knowing You, that ABBA wrote, Björn wrote, near the end of ABBA's life. And with all that information and many years of listening to the albums, I then found Catherine Johnson. I had worked with a few other writers who had come up with various ideas, but none of them were right. So it was about 5 years ago that I met Catherine.
How fortunate for us all.
Yes, I knew from the moment I met her, she was right. So we took it from there, and Catherine.
Well, Catherine, you're a writer. You have a lot of writing credits. However,
Yes, no musicals. I had a phone call from my agent. It was just after New Year's Day, and he said, I've been talking to a producer called Judy Craymer, and she needs somebody to write a musical based around the songs of ABBA. And I said, it's me, I have to do it. And then I came off the phone and thought, I can't think of anything. But he arranged for me to meet Judy, and my work previously has always been in fringe theatre, and it's sort of 4 actors and 1 set and a budget of £250, which is like $500. So I thought Judy was going to be some kind of, impresario chewing a cigar. And guess what? She was. But it was one of those meetings. We hit it off immediately, and very serendipitously, we're all the same age, Judy, Philly, and I. So we were all coming from the same place, as it were. And Judy talked about some of the things she's just said about the generational stuff. And as we sat there chatting, the story that we have now actually started to form, this idea about doing a mother-daughter relationship. And then from somewhere out of the blue came the three dads, who is my dad's story.
When did you meet Abba, or when did you meet Björn?
Well, Judy said, you know, they need to be convinced. You have to convince Benny and Björn before we can go any further with this. So she loved the story, but she said, go away and write me up a treatment. So I wrote something, I don't know, what was about 5 pages? Something
was
like
it that much?
Yes, it was. It was probably more than that. And she sent it off to Björn and came back to me on the phone and said, yes, he loves it, but he wants to meet you. So I think it was about a month later that I had my first meeting with Björn, and I was so scared. I thought you'd be really scary.
Yes, and funnily, well, it was a great meeting. I mean, I was convinced. And right after that, funnily enough, I went to see a very tired version of Grease with my daughters in London. And then and there, I understood the potential of Mamma Mia, you know, family-oriented entertainment, uplifting, funny, with lots of hits in it. So I was convinced 100%. So that's when we really started off.
Well, at what point then did Phyllida join the team? Phyllida?
We had to get, Catherine had to write the first draft after
So
her
you
5
weren't involved
pages.
at the very beginning. So you didn't involve in any of the initial writing. You were not involved in coaching it in any way. It was
She was
really being shaped by you and
Phyllida was,
Catherine.
yes, shaped, but then, yes, Phyllida was very involved once we got to first and second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth,
yeah,
seventh draft.
Characters came and went.
After Björn and Benny seemed to like what they had heard, then you set out to write the piece.
Yeah.
Well, I think the important question, we always ask the composers and lyricists, which came first, the music or the lyrics? They always answer us, well, it depends. Sometimes music, sometimes lyrics. And so we're not going to ask you which came first in Abba's creation, music or lyrics. But I think we should know which came first, the book or the score.
Well, the score, because the score was 25 years old.
No, but I don't mean that. I don't mean that. Did you select the 22 numbers that are in the...
Yeah, it had to
first, or did you write the book first?
No, because it had to, I mean, I read the lyrics first. Judy gave me the collected lyrics, and I...
Of 100 songs?
Yes, we
Yeah.
had, we knew
There was
that
some
a
I
few
could
weren't going to
discount.
make it
Quite early
to
on.
the final version.
Quite a few were forbidden.
Catherine had 2 challenges, really. I mean, her main challenge was the story had to be more important than the music and the songs. And I'd worked for many years as a script editor in film and television, and knew that the script had to be worked on in that way, which I don't think theatre book musicals always are, because you're writing the music and the lyrics at the same time. You don't have the time to concentrate on the story in the book. So Catherine's big challenge was to concentrate. I mean, the story had to be more important than the music and the lyrics, and she couldn't change the lyrics. So she couldn't adapt any lyrics to suit her story. She had to work
So
within
every
her.
lyric we hear now is it precisely as you wrote it.
Yeah, well, a few little details, but...
Details there that really for joke reasons, aren't
yeah,
they?
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
To remind the audience that we might have made changes if we'd wanted to.
That was a challenge to Björn as well, because he was itching to change his lyrics.
I
Yeah,
was
we
sitting
did
there
have to
rewriting
sit on
all the
him in
time.
rehearsals all the time and say, no, keep it that way.
Well, that theory obviously proved successful, because you wouldn't be where you are necessarily. You may have improved on it, but you did well by staying true to
I
it.
mean, what was
And I thought that was the challenge of the whole thing. Now, what Judy just said, the ground rules. You cannot change the words. You have 100 songs to choose from. You can choose any of these, almost,
Yeah.
except the forbidden ones.
Why couldn't you change the lyrics?
Because...
We might as well have written a
you
new
might-
musical
yes,
then,
exactly. That was the experiment.
And also,
would it be possible to do it? I mean,
the risk of sounding contentious, actually, there are places where the lyrics don't quite fit the situation, and that's part of the tension and thrill of the show. Sometimes there's a really big gap between the lyrics and the situation, and that's great fun. Other times the gap is closed completely and you think, my God, this song must have been written for the scene. How could it possibly have been written 25 years ago? And it's just playing with that dynamic that is the essence.
I think
of the
one of the
piece.
songs, and Dancing Queen, for example, which I think you may not feel it's the most popular, but I think that's certainly one that gets the most reaction. That's one that maybe it's a good idea if we would try to take a look at a segment of that, so we know what we're talking about. Dancing Queen plays a prominent role in the production, and I think that you can tell us later if there's anything that has been changed in Dancing Queen. Well, let's maybe we can just look at about a minute of it, if we can cue that up, and we'll see if it fits. If you can say how it fit in. I don't want to see how you can tell us how it fit into the.
That's
into the
not
book,
fair.
particularly that one. And
Anybody could be that guy. Night is young and the music's high. With the beer of music, everything is fine. You're in the mood for dance. And when you get the chance, you are the dancing queen. Young and sweet, only 17. Dancing queen, feel the beat from the tambourine. Oh yeah, you can dance, you can jive, having the time of your life. Ooh, see that girl, watch that scene, she's the dancing queen. See that girl, watch that scene, she's the dancing queen.
no question about how that can appeal to an audience. Now, do you want to tell us now? First of all, those are exactly the same lyrics that.
Absolutely, yeah.
How did that fit into the? How did you get that to fit into the book?
Well, Dancing Queen was one of the more difficult ones because I think some of the more emotional numbers, like Winner Takes It All, that just feels so organically right in the piece where it comes. But with Dancing Queen, there didn't seem to be a way that I could actually make the characters go into a moment that was very much of the now and of the moment. So what we thought about doing there was kind of using it more as a sort of a memory and a nostalgic moment. So we have these three women who used to sing in a band that did ABBA covers, which is kind of a good way of getting a few ABBA songs in there. And they're having a moment in the bedroom together. And everything's tension's high, very fraught. Donna, the mother, has just made a discovery that's, completely blown her mind. And her friends are trying to cheer her up. And basically, they're just saying to her, look, come on, just remember what you used to be like. And then they do go into the bedroom scene number of doing Dancing Queen. And we thought we'd do it very much as girls do at home, picking up your hairbrush, singing into the mirror, so that it was kind of... It's a very theatrical number, but it's sort of done in a very intimate, enclosed way. I mean, Phyllida really is the one to talk about the staging of this. I just put, that's where the song goes, and Phyllida was the one who made it work.
That clip actually is not the scene from the show.
I know, that's the...
The scene from the show is a lot more chaotic, homespun, and, most people in the audience, certainly our generations, the 40-somethings, memory of leaping around the bedroom, singing into a deodorant, rock songs, going mad and jumping on the bed with your girlfriends.
Still doing it.
You are saying women jumping on the bed with their girlfriends? Yes, okay.
And in a way there, the gap is between the homespunness of these women and the audience memory of the perfection of ABBA themselves. that's the fun of it.
With the inventiveness of that number, where they're using scuba diving and brushes and everything, is that all yours?
It's not. What we did was we gave the original London cast 2 suitcases. One of the women we decided was the kind of person who came on holiday with a snorkel. This was very much in Catherine's writing, that she was Miss Outward Bound, and you know, her suitcase was full of books and sporting equipment. And the other one was Prada and Versace, and more like our producer. And we gave the actors, the actresses, 2 suitcases. One contained one set of props, one contained the other. And we then said, right, improvise the song using the contents of your suitcase. And what we've done all around the world is to develop that. It's changed everywhere we've gone, because, you know, the American suitcase may contain slightly different things to the London or the Australian suitcase.
Well, can we pick up the thread now? We've got Catherine busy doing the script, and then tell us how it then got to its next step.
Well, the next step really was to find the director, to find Phyllida, and I knew it had to be a top director, or Benny and Björn could, you know, I knew that Benny and Björn could get out of this at any moment, and my life depended on this. So got Catherine, and actually I knew Phyllida's work. I knew very well of her work and was a big fan, and I loved 6 Degrees of Separation that she'd done at the Royal Court in London, and Threepenny Opera at the Donmar Warehouse. But I had no idea, because she's very well known for classical theatre and opera, that she would be interested in doing a commercial musical. But I was working with her agent at the time on a film, who one of her clients was on the film, and she said, "Have you ever thought of Phyllida Lloyd?" And I said, "Well, you know, really." And we met, and Catherine at that stage had completed the first draft, and we kind of, you know, it was very much work in progress. And I remember meeting with Phyllida with my fingers crossed and very nervous, thinking she'll tell me to go and take a hike. And I know she'd just honed up on her Abba songs. And I remember it was 4 years ago, because I was just about to be 40, Phyllida was 40, so we were very kind of into age here. And I remember it was just before my 40th birthday, and I said, "Well, when will you let us know?" And she said, "Before you're 40. And she did, within a couple of days, and thank goodness she did, really. So then the rest of the team began to fall into place.
Right.
It wasn't until I had the team in place that I started to raise the money. That was what you were going to ask, isn't it?
Right, so and I'm going to ask you how much money you raised. Well, first of all, what was your intention, though? You knew you had a score, and you now had a book, and you'd been fortunate enough to get Phyllida to agree. Now, where were you going to go with this? Your background seems to me you were a stage manager at one point on Cats. Were you not the original production stage manager?
Yes, I was. I was Cameron's original stage manager for Cats in London, and now he's my landlord, because we're in his theatre with Mamma Mia. So he owes me a lot.
But you had deep roots in the.
I trained at the Guildhall School of Music and studied music and opera and stage management, and then went off to work in musicals and opera doing stage management, and ended up working for Cameron in 1978-79 as an ASM on My Fair Lady in Oklahoma back then. And now he's about to do the new production.
That's Cameron McIntosh for anybody who happens to have been also living in that same cave.
Sir Cameron. And
so now you're aiming this show. How did you decide that it was ready, and then you decided to capitalize it? Aim for what?
I think as soon as everyone was moving forward with the book, and Björn was happy with everything, and I decided to start raising the capitalization. But before that, we did a workshop which was a very important and interesting process. That was in April '98. We opened the show in April '99, so it was exactly a year before. And I had started to raise the money. I mean, our main investor is Universal Music, who was then Polygram. So they were interested. They kept saying, oh, wait to the next draft of the script, but we weren't having it. So they came on board about that time, but we also, it was very important that we did this workshop, which was just a creative workshop. It wasn't to raise money, it wasn't to an audience, it was just to work through the creative process, for Phyllida to work through the creative process, and Catherine, and to present it to the creative team and their agents. And yes, there were a couple of Universal executives there. And I
How
think
long was
Phyllida
that workshop?
It was a week.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
2 weeks, 10 days. Yeah.
And that's a very brief workshop by
It
today's
is,
standard.
but actually Judy had us on a very long, it was a much more lengthy and complex process than that, which actually the workshop was sort of both the culmination of the first phase and the beginning, wasn't it, of a whole other phase.
Yeah.
And I really think that one of the keys to the production, apart from obviously the people she picked, was the fact that she was prepared to take such pains to get us to develop the work on every front. And I remember the designer at one point saying to me, God, how many more bloody workshops are we going to do on this show? As if, you know, it's like no stone is being, you know, left unturned to try to get the thing to feel, give it strength and structure. And because Catherine had had to work so hard to even create the structure, that then the whole process of actually breathing life into the characters was a whole other area, wasn't it?
Sort of, though I think those things always come together. You know, you can't actually write the script, the plot, unless you know who the characters are and therefore what they might do.
But you were working away during that workshop, weren't you?
Well, the workshop was a complete illumination for me because I suddenly realised how wrong I'd got it all. So I just went away and rewrote the script again. I just got something, a very central issue of the script, absolutely wrong. And it was helped to have a workshop to see it. And I just spent the whole 2 weeks thinking, this is dreadful, this is so wrong. It was agony for me.
Did you
solved it.
It was
Excuse me.
important for Björn as well because of how the music then integrated with it. It was the first time you could hear the songs with the story.
Quite a few were changed from that, of course.
A few of those. You mean you replaced?
Replaced
songs?
with others, yeah.
I mean, there was one time I remember we were thinking we've got to open the second half with a bang and we haven't got the right number, and we were just sort of getting you to scrabble through your, you know, the things that had fallen on the cutting room floor. We were saying, haven't you got a song, a sort of nightmare sequence, a sort of, you know, we want to do the Agnes de Mille dream ballet at the beginning of the second half. And that's when you...
And he said yes,
He
got
said
one of those, yes.
and found us under attack. So it was, the thing was constantly on the move,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
Yeah.
Right to the wire, really.
Did you use
Absolutely, yeah.
Did you use a cast, a full cast for that in your workshop? What size was that?
I think we had 6 people, and 3 of them actually went on to play the leads in the London production. And in fact, they were quite an a couple of them were quite an inspiration,
Yeah.
weren't they?
I think that's the wonderful thing about workshops, when they're creative workshops, when they're not just something that you're bringing in to raise money, when you can get an exchange from all the contributors, including the performers. I think that's the original workshop that we know here was with a chorus line, and everybody contributed to make that. And that was also a very lengthy one, several workshops. But unfortunately, we're not seeing those kinds anymore. We're seeing workshops are more... Unfortunately, you were very good. That was 3 years ago. Was it full about 5 years ago? But now they're purely. It gets difficult when people are using it to raise money.
Yes. No, it was important. It was kind of closed and not open to anybody but us, really. And it was a good investment. But still, Björn and Benny could have pulled out at any moment.
But it's a very interesting point about workshops, that they are they're either one thing or they're the other thing. They're either to develop the work, or they're just about fixing it in order to present it.
Showcasing it,
and
the
there's
material.
a massive difference. And if you're just doing it to showcase the material, you're not moving forward at all. It's critical to actually be free to just demolish, things that don't work, and not feel you're doing it as some sort of as a presentational thing.
Did your relationships strain during the workshops because you were allowing each other to fail if you wanted to? Did it put any stress on it?
Speaking, it's just been wonderful. I don't think our relationships have strained at all, have they?
Well, certainly not now, and
No, but even back then,
we had
get on, don't we?
We had a very, we had a great creative process, really. I mean, everyone enjoyed it. Everyone was busy doing other projects and working on other shows or films, productions. Björn and Benny were busy with Christina and other things, but we did enjoy it, even though I think we've all worked on creative processes that we haven't enjoyed as much.
I always puzzle over why some creative processes, regardless of how the end product, some of them show great stresses and strains amongst the participants, and others are love fests, like it sounds like what yours was. And I never found out what is the reason that some work so well and some strain relationships.
It's because there were 3 women involved,
I vouch for that.
I think I'm going to keep that as the answer. Isabel.
No, but sorry.
No, go on.
In a way, I think it's very much because of the women involved here. They're in the majority, and I think that's the only hit musical ever made where women are in a majority when it comes to the creative process. So that's very interesting.
Probably so.
I would like to know who handles the finances of this international corporation as you move from country to country and theater to theater. Who is responsible for that?
Let's get us on our feet first, and then we're going to pin Judy down to tell us about all those financials. But we haven't gotten to there yet. We're going to find out one way or the other. But we now have a show ready, and you're ready to raise money.
Yes, finishing on the workshop, it was then that it was another big boost that everyone knew that we must push forward with this. And I also have a co-producer, Richard East, who works with me, who lives in Australia, so he wasn't always in London all the time. But it was then that, he, myself, and Björn and Benny, and Phyllida and all of us went, right, we now have to really get on with it. So we had to find a theatre, which wasn't easy. There was no room at the inn in the West End. And actually it wasn't that easy to sell the project to theatre owners. They kind of thought that we were trying to do an ABBA tribute show, or it was the story of ABBA's lives, which, however many times I told them it wasn't, and definitely Benny and Björn would never have allowed that. There was no theatre until Cameron Mackintosh offered us. We started auditioning in September '98, and we were almost through with auditions. We had no theatre, and Cameron called because Ragtime had just pulled out of the West End, and he offered us the Prince Edward Theatre. And we had been thinking of a much smaller theatre. We'd been thinking of a kind of 1,200 or 1,100 seater, and the Prince Edward is a 1,650 seater. And I had kind of budgeted the show and capitalised it at little less than you would for a 1,600 seater, so it was a bit of a white knuckle ride at that time. But we took the Prince Edward, and Benny, Björn and I had worked there with chess, and it's a beautiful theatre, so we said goodbye to our contingency and just got on with it.
Adrian, we're going to let you talk in a little bit.
I'm preparing for that.
But as the publicist, you had nothing yet to publicize at this point.
I'm waiting.
Judy, did you ever consider opening it somewhere other than in London or other than in England? Had you ever considered?
Well, it's funny you should say that, because yes, during the whole kind of 3 years of us all working together, it started as, yes, maybe a fringe theatre, then maybe out of town in Manchester, or maybe in Bristol. Nothing to do with
That
Catherine coming
nice.
from Bristol.
Yeah.
So, yes, and actually it was at the workshop that it was Phyllida and Mark Thompson that were like, no, let's just go straight to the West End.
Well, that was a confidence in the material, I guess, at that point. You felt it was ready to go to the West End. Did you have sites eventually for around the world, and including Broadway at that point?
No, Judy may have done, but none of us really. We were our ambitions were quite modest at the beginning.
Well, but it's a big jump from a workshop to open immediately at the West End.
I think the designer was a crucial part of it. When we were looking at little theatres and bigger theatres, he said, and we were going, my God, can we really jump into the Prince Edward? This is a very intimate domestic show. And he said, take the Prince Edward, I'll make the Prince Edward work. And we suddenly felt, gosh, his confidence in it was really central.
And it isn't easy, you feel that there's less spotlight on you opening out of town, but technically and physically for the production, it's a bit of a nightmare, really. So, and we knew we had great faith in Mark Thompson, because he's our designer and a fantastic one. So we took everything he said seriously, and he did make the Prince Edward very intimate, and has had many a theatre to do since.
What did it cost to open at the Prince Edward?
Just under £3 million, which was a kind of quite a high budget, but medium high. It wasn't the highest in the West End at the moment, but it was quite high. And
that's about $5 million, right?
yeah, I mean, everything is much more expensive here on Broadway, and always has been. Ticket prices also higher. And we opened the show with a kind of moderate advance of £2 million, and it wasn't until we kind of opened and the word of mouth started that that the box office really began to pick up, even though we were quite happy with the £2 million at the time.
How large is the cast now?
There are about 30 of them.
About 30 on stage. And did you start with that many?
Pretty much.
On the West End you started?
Yes.
So you grew from a workshop with half a dozen people. You then went in great multiples to get to fill the stage of Prince Edward.
Yes.
Right. Right. And that must have affected your budget in some way.
No, yes,
The
that was
running budget.
that was always yes. It's I have a very we have a very brilliant general manager in London, Andrew Tregus, and Nina Lannon here, so they're very good on their running costs. I mean, Mamma Mia recouped in London in 27 weeks, the 3 million, or just under 3 million, which was great, and marvellous, in fact. And then we started making plans to take the show to other territories. But we'd never had plans before. I mean, everyone was just concentrating on London, and that's where we were focused, really.
At what point did you know that you were this grand success in London that merited additional productions? Certainly not on opening night.
Well, I mean, the first preview was very exciting, and I remember our general manager saying to Björn, because the audience was marvellous, crazy, stood up, big standing ovation, and he said, listen, this is just a first preview, audience, you'll never see this again. And we were very, relieved or thankful that every night they've been like that. So I think with the audience response and the box office response, we knew we could take it further. I mean, we opened the second booking period about 6 weeks after the opening night, and the show was taking about £500,000 a day, pounds.
But there was never any talk of going straight to Broadway after London.
Wasn't that?
Oh, no.
Why?
No.
Why?
Well, mainly because I was scared of what had happened to me with chess.
Chess, right.
And,
which is a wonderful show, and it's still a mystery why it's not still running, by the way.
Yeah, well, you can...
And we'll see it again sometime. I know we're going to see Chess. I know we're going to see Chess. Chess was a show that
How did you
Björn
choose
wrote.
the theaters that you went into from London and into New York? How do you choose your theaters?
Well,
first we chose Toronto.
Toronto was
as
the first
the
one.
next stop.
Toronto was important. I mean, it happened that the Royal Alexander Theatre was a perfect theatre. I mean, it was intimate. It's an old Edwardian theatre. It's 1,400 seats. I mean, we always were looking for quite intimate theatres, and also they have to be capable of fitting our sound equipment, which is quite complex. But the Royal Alex in Toronto was perfect, and it was the perfect time. The creative team were free and available to work on the show, so that was our first toe in the water. And also Toronto, Canada, was warm towards Abba. So we started in Toronto for 6 months at the Royal Alex, and then that company was to tour into the United States, premiering in San Francisco 6 months later. And probably about 3 weeks before we opened in Toronto, the box office was looking very good, and the kind of word on the street was very good. So we made a decision to stay in Toronto, that we would take the company that was about to open in Toronto as scheduled on the road into the States, but we'd create a new company to sit down in Toronto, which is still there and running successfully. We've just done the 3rd audition process for the 3rd company. So we didn't intend to have a sit-down in Toronto. We intended just to be creating the US tour.
Judy, the financing of Toronto, was that the original investors who had invested in?
All our original investors from London followed through with us. So they followed us to Toronto and the US tour.
Are they separate entities, though, in each company? Is that a separate entity, or is there one blanket company that is producing financing?
It's our company, Björn, Benny, Richard East, and my company, Little Star. Which is
you are producers, but are your investors investing? If Toronto had not, let's say Toronto's a huge success, as we know, but if in San Francisco it hadn't been successful, is it the same financing that put the show on in San Francisco that put it on in Toronto and the West End?
Yeah.
Right. So
if it had not worked somewhere, of course, they might have jumped ship somewhere along the way. And then Australia, where we opened in June of this year. But
we have tried to get some of the investors to, get lost, but they they just want to keep on and on and on.
Answering Isabel's question, it's never easy to find a theatre. People always say, why did they choose that theatre? I mean, they're not always available, and you always have a dream theatre, but we have been very lucky. I mean, the Princess Theatre in Melbourne was a perfect theatre. We could have opened in Sydney, but the theatre in Melbourne was a much better theatre to create the show from, and for the creative and technical process. And going on the road in the US, you have to be prepared for pretty much everything. So we'd gone from the small Royal Alex, intimate Royal Alex, into the huge Orpheum in San Francisco, which is about 2,200 seats, and then on to the even huger Schubert Theatre. And again, Mark adapted his set with a travelling portable proscenium to make the theatre intimate. And then the Winter Garden was, again, if we'd wanted to go straight from London to Broadway, there was no theatre available at that time. And then, as Toronto did well, the US tour was doing well, the Winter Garden came free, and Gerald Schoenfeld offered it to us. We were very lucky again.
Do you want to tell us how the adjustment that you had to make, Phyllida, in each venue as they grew or shrunk?
I think that I'm quite used, having done quite a bit of opera on the road, to getting people to just adapt to different spaces, and they adapt very quickly. We work very hard at creating a big energy for the space, and an energy that's not dependent on this for the spoken side of it.
But you are mic'd. They
are mic'd, but we really work from the basis that the speaking shouldn't be. I get incensed when I go and see a lot of musicals, and you look at the stage and you don't actually know who's speaking, because actors just aren't capable of giving the energy that people gave on the Winter Garden stage 30 years ago without any help at all, and managed to fill it with their voices. So we do a lot of work on. We ought to be able to manage this. The songs obviously weren't written to be done without electronic help. But it hasn't been too much of a problem.
I think that you say the songs obviously needed amplification to have their impact. I think that the first chord that struck when you're in the theater, both the beginning of the show and at intermission, I think Tommy rivals that. Is the only other show that comes clear to my mind that has that kind of excitement with that first chord that goes on. I think we'd miss that terribly if we didn't have that kind of amplification. I share your view. I think everybody does about not knowing who's speaking when they're lost. I don't think you'd find that problem in Mamma Mia. Part of it has to do, I'm sure, with the direction, the focus, and the lighting. You know who's speaking at all times, which is again a tribute to your production.
I think the show has extraordinary sound design. I mean, really no other Broadway show has anything like it. Björn and Benny and the sound designers have really paid a lot of attention to that. The show has sound booths backstage where people are singing when they're not on stage. It is the most sophisticated sound system I think ever done on Broadway.
It's a French system that hasn't been used here before, I don't think.
Yeah.
Hasn't been used for theatre at all before we did it in London.
It fills the theater nicely. I can say that. It fills the theater nicely without that distortion sometimes. I have to ask you a question. The sound that we hear on stage, to possibly untrained ear like mine, comes very close to what I hear Abba singing in terms of that female dominance.
Yes.
Now, is that designed by you, or is that a happenstance?
No, it's
three women.
designed. I was thinking about arrangements in the early days. Should we write new arrangements for these songs? And I came to the conclusion that whatever we do, we start off by doing them as they were, to see whether that works in the theatre or not. And of course, we used to be 5 guys sitting around playing to some chords and never writing anything down, ever. So I had to give the multi-track tapes to a guy who actually physically wrote down what everyone played on all of those songs. So when you hear the bass player at the theatre now, he's playing exactly the same thing as the one did 25 years ago. And that goes for the backing vocals and for everything. So it's true, what you hear are the original arrangements.
Right. And I think maybe that was a great decision that you made, because it really enhances the evening for the audience.
There have been a few little changes here and there, but for dramatic reasons.
But we're hearing Abba. We're not. That's exactly what we're hearing when we're in the theater. No question about it.
I think it's very satisfying as well sometimes when something starts off, you're hearing Mamma Mia because you're hearing, say, in When It Takes It All, you're hearing Donna singing. And then there's that need for it to kind of become full-blown ABBA as well. And it works so fluidly. You don't sort of feel there's a jolt between Mamma Mia, the musical, and ABBA, the song. You know, it all kind of flows in. But I do myself feel, I love it when it goes into the big crescendo there like that.
Well, I want to get back to the money, money, money. As a matter of fact, so as not to hurt you, I think maybe we'll eventually get to showing a clip of money, money, money. But let's talk more about the money, money, money. That
before the clip.
Yes, before the clip. We'll do the clip, and then we'll use that for emphasis if you can.
Okay.
But money, money, money was that one of your biggest successes?
I can't say.
I didn't.
You can't say, or you
But
won't say.
one thing I know, there was never any problem raising money for Mamma Mia.
No, I meant the
That's
song.
interesting. Why?
Well, because everyone wanted to be in.
How did they know
Well, they
about
didn't
it?
at the beginning.
Well,
Once success had been achieved, everybody wants to get a part of it, of course.
From the very beginning?
No, but I
Judy
think that Judy
remembers
said
better than I do. I think.
she struggled to get it on at first, but at least with the.
Well, as I said earlier, Universal were very much part of that, even though that wasn't all the financing. But once they were convinced and in, then it was much easier. And it's worked very well because it's been a kind of, it isn't a traditional subscription, you know, because it wasn't open to other investors from other shows. It was just a kind of select group, really, that took a risk. I mean, took the risk and then took the risk to go on into Toronto and Australia and all the other shows. So that that worked quite well, really. We have gathered some other investors on the way, and people have been very keen to invest, which is nice.
Well, are you able to use the proceeds from the successful productions to finance, or are you taking new financing each time?
Every production is set up separately, and every production we are obliged to bring in our original investors, so unless they actually drop out.
So they're not in that case, they're not cross-collateralized as such.
Oh no, none of them are cross-collateralized. They're all individual, but the same investors.
Right.
Mm.
Well, now you've had successes around the country. You can get to Chicago. You've had successes around the country here. At some point you made a decision that I guess you got Björn quieted enough to think that it was okay to try Broadway?
Absolutely. I mean, I felt we were sort of closing in. And we were to come to this city with a reputation, which is so different from the one, I mean, people here didn't know about chess at all. And we were naive and stupid to do it. But so this time the strategy was to close in slowly and build up a reputation.
To start a word of mouth, which has always been our greatest marketing tool.
There you go. No, but it was a very unusual approach which paid off big time. The idea of using Toronto almost as a tryout for Broadway in North America was extraordinary, and I don't think anyone has really done that before. Have been out for a year before you come to Broadway in North America with a major musical was an extraordinary strategy, and it really worked.
I mean, when I first came to marketing meetings here, when it was going to be Toronto and then the tour, everyone was saying, "Oh, you can never tour in the States. You're not a Broadway branded show." Adrian didn't say that.
I didn't say that.
But other people were saying it, and because the marketing ploys here are very much about award-winning and Broadway branded, and we didn't have any of those things. We had a success in London and Abba, which again everyone said, but nobody knows Abba in America, which we soon discovered as soon as we opened in San Francisco that they did. Big time.
I think the other thing that happened too, there was a lot of advice to not play cities in the Northeast around the same time as the Broadway opening. There was a great feeling, we shouldn't be in Boston at the same time that we're opening on Broadway. Well, the show is playing in Boston right now, breaking records there, and I think it's going to break records here.
But there was concern that if you were successful in Boston, it would slant the reviewers or the audience. What was the concern?
I think it would eat away at the audience. It would diminish the audience coming from the Northeast to see the show. It would diminish setting up the Broadway production. It would.
Or if Boston got negative reviews, it might have had an effect.
But I think the idea also that it would divert media attention.
That's, I think, I can understand that.
When did you come into it, Adrian?
I became involved about 6 months after the London opening. Mm-hmm. And I've been overseeing the productions that have happened since then, focusing on Broadway. And I'd say the real challenge has been to keep the word out about the show without hyping it, without overhyping it, letting other people say the good words about it. We made a very conscious effort to get the American critics over to see it in London, to get their feeling about it there, to get their input there. But the campaign has been very bold, but it hasn't been at all hypey. It's just ads that say the show's coming, not ads that say it's absolutely brilliant before we opened here.
I think it was very successful doing it that way. I know how often you can set up a critic you can challenge a critic if you bring in the quotes from elsewhere, and you bring in the long success of the multiple productions on it. Who can tell me how Abba fared in terms of its popularity in the States as compared to elsewhere?
Well, in the 70s, to be successful here, you physically had to be here. I mean, all the groups toured America, 6 months a year. And they went to radio stations and sucked up to them, and they did all these things that were considered necessary in those times. We were not prepared to do that. That's a fact. I mean, we didn't come here very often. We only toured once, and we had 25 gigs or something in the States. But we had 15 top 20s. So we did very, very well here as well. Not as well as in the rest of the world.
But your records were selling here.
Oh yeah, millions.
Records.
Yes.
But it was kind of curious. Everybody knew how popular Abba was, but better around the world. And I think that material is certainly totally acceptable to us here. I promised talking about money, money, money. So I think that maybe before we take our break, maybe we should get a look at a clip of Money, 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 and then we can maybe pick up again on some more money if we can.
Yeah, sure we can.
So why don't we go to the videotape on Money, Money, Money and see what it was like.
Money, 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 must be funny in a rich man's world. Money, 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 always sunny in a rich man's world. Oh, the things I could do if I had a little money. It's a rich man's world.
I'd like to see the whole show, but right now we have to break, and while they turn their cameras around or whatever they do, so you can get up, stretch, turn around, and come right back to your seats so we can go on with exploring what makes Mamma Mia so fantastically, monumentally successful. Thank you very much for being here. Don't go far away.
This is CUNY TV, the City University of New York.
Welcome back to the American Theatre Wing's Working in Theatre seminar on production. Before we turn into our discussion, I would like to emphasize that even though these seminars and our annual Tony Awards for Excellence in the Theatre are the most visible of our activities, they are only a small part of the work we do for the community. As a long-established charity, we serve both theatre and the community with our year-round programs. The Wing works to develop new audiences for the theatre and for a broadening of young minds. We bring the magic of theatre to those who would otherwise not know its power. Programs for students include Introduction to Broadway, which in its 10-year history has enabled almost 100,000 New York City high school students to attend a Broadway show, many for the first time. The Wing also introduces young people to the theatre by bringing professionals into schools for workshops as a part of our Theatre in School program. Additionally, with our hospital program dating back to World War II when the Wing created the legendary stage door canteens, we continue to entertain patients at hospitals, nursing homes, aid centers, and child care facilities in the New York area with volunteer talent from Broadway, off-Broadway, and the cabaret world. We bring live entertainment, hope, and joy to those who are not able to get out and attend the theatre. Our grants and scholarship programs provide essential funding where it is so needed today to help launch the productions in the not-for-profit world. We take pride in the work we do and remain grateful to our members and everyone whose contributions make the work of the American Theatre Wing possible. Our work strengthens the ties between the theatre and the community, and we are proud to be a part of this great effort. I would now like to go on with the second part of our program. Roy?
Thank you, Isabel. Well, I think we left off with Money, Money, Money. So maybe it's a good idea we pick up there. I think what we'd like to do is understand the cost of bringing in this juggernaut to Broadway. For example, How much did it cost?
It cost $10 million, maybe a few cents under, to be exact.
And that's independent then of the
Of
free
all-
Broadway, the companies that have been running simultaneously. This is just to bring it to Broadway. That's from
Yeah.
inception. It cost $10 million.
Yes.
And then what? And you capitalized it at somewhere in that neighborhood.
Capitalised at $10 million, including advertising, everything,
And a contingency.
and a contingency. The operating costs are between 360 and just over 400.
It was very modest what can you possibly gross?
Over 900,000 a week.
So your investors
Michigan.
your investors are going to do very nicely.
Well, we hope. We have to.
How
We
do
always hope.
Now, how do you share these proceeds with your investors?
Well, of course, as I explained, our investors are originated in London, even though we do have some American investors for Broadway. But the traditional deal in the UK is a 60-40 split.
Who gets the 60?
60 to the investors, 40 to the producers. And we use the same, we mirrored the same deal here. So
It's very gracious.
very, very generous, I thought. Yeah.
Traditionally being at 50-50.
Yeah.
But
So it's exactly the same. And so, yes, hopefully we will recoup within a reasonable time, about 40 weeks. Could be less, could be more. We recouped, as I explained in London, we recouped in 27 weeks. We recouped on schedule for Toronto and the US tour as well. And hopefully we will in New York.
So it's costing about twice as much to do the show on Broadway than it did in the West End.
Yes, and I think that's just because costs are higher here. It's the same production, I think. We have the same size orchestra and cast.
But it's mounting it costs twice as
Mounting
much.
it costs,
It would
yeah.
appear, I think you said it was £3 million.
Advertising is huge. Marketing and advertising is enormous everywhere, and here you have to invest in advertising and marketing to get your return ready. Even though we haven't actually gone to television advertising for Broadway yet, so we made a bit of a saving there. We've put that aside for a rainy day.
But do you have $1 million set aside for your advertising?
Yes.
In your budget? Just about $1 million?
Yeah.
Again, well, how are you spending it?
Well, no, it's been a very modest campaign. There has been some very traditional moves, like full-page ads in the New York Times, quite early on. There's been quite a lot of radio, because obviously the music is very identifiable and very important to people. But it's not been an extreme campaign. And I think this goes back to not the false modesty, but the practicality of not getting overexposed, not hyping too early. I think we've seen a lot of big shows come in that had a lot of exposure out of town, and I mentioned this, a show I like, Ragtime, which by the time it came to New York had been so heavily advertised and so hyped that there was almost a feeling of déjà vu. People felt they'd seen the show already because the marketing had been so extreme up front. And I think the whole advertising budget has been reflected we've had a very steady presence, but not an over-the-top presence for the last 6 months. But it has not been extreme at all.
Do you know if your record sales have, in this country, have responded as favorably as the...
Oh, yes. Yes, they have.
So what is...
Every city the tour has gone through, there's a marked difference.
Right, so when it starts
And
out...
as it happens, I'm going to collect an award today.
Oh, well, congratulations.
It's Abba Gold has sold over 20 million, which is not bad for a group that died 25 years ago.
As a matter of fact, it's very good. Indeed. It strikes me as a curious turnaround. It was the Abba who created the show and was responsible for the success of the show, and now this show is bringing Abba back up. So I don't know where it goes after that. Perhaps
I'll have to think of something.
Yes, I think, yes, Mamma Mia is now promoting Abba, I think.
Yes, that's it.
But we had a lot of support from Universal, who are Abba's record company as well, in the marketing and advertising. And that was incredibly helpful and worked well for us in the budget as well, with all the campaigns.
Well, now, talk about the cast itself, if you would, Phyllida. You don't have any, what we would say, household names in the cast, but you've carefully selected your companies.
Yes, it's quite important to us not to have stars in the show, which might seem perverse, but in a way, we're lucky not to need a star. We've got really Abba as our star, and the auditions are very painstaking, and we're looking for people with what we think of as the Mamma Mia factor, which you know, you may be able to sing, dance, and act brilliantly, but if you haven't got the Mamma Mia factor, then you're out on your ear. So,
could you define the Mamma Mia factor? We may have people who are. This is going to be a long-running show. We have people who may want to audition.
I think it's finding people with the spirit of Catherine's book. It's some people with a very good sense of humour, big personality, and people that don't necessarily fit into that body beautiful, worked out, I don't know, legs up to here, legs up to here. You know, people who might not be able to get seen for a lot of Broadway musicals, actually. And we're looking for actors. You know, we love actors who can sing, rather than what we think of as, we have a thing we put on our sheets when we're auditioning, a bit MT, which means a bit musical theatre, which is a negative against somebody.
So you're really looking for people who are straight out performers and not professional performers, but not necessarily musical theatre. They're folks, as it were.
Our dream is a sort of an aging rock star who's just discovered that he can act, and
it's a good field for you. A good field for you.
Oh, I only got the one track on each album, so that says it all.
How did you find your cast in America?
Again, it was a really long process. We worked with fantastic casting director Tara Rubin and David Grinrod, who's our English casting director, who came over to sort of do diplomatic relations. And we saw hundreds of people, thousands maybe, and you know, we saw some people with huge Broadway experience, and we've got you know, a couple of those in the show, Karen Mason, Judy Kay, who really have, you know, some people would see as very very musical theatre, but they've definitely got the Mamma Mia factor. And it's just a very long-winded thing. There's a lot of arguments amongst us. We're always fighting.
Now, who else there for your auditions? Your team? Well,
the musical director, Martin Koch, the choreographer, Anthony Van Last, and his associate. And then when we get down to the real sort of final auditions, Judy, Björn, and myself.
Catherine, you're left out of this?
Yeah, I'd be useless. I haven't got a clue. Everyone looks marvellous to me. I don't know a thing.
But you certainly would, everybody is sensitive and they have to portray the characters that you've created. Though.
Well, fortunately, I'm working with a team that absolutely knows what to do. They know who the characters are, so they know exactly who's right. I've never seen anybody that I've thought, oh my God, why did they choose them?
One of the things that's really key to it is that unlike a lot of musicals where they're looking for clones of their original, you know, the shape of the original person, we absolutely aren't. We're trying to all the time turn the thing on its head and be open to, you know, whether it's a multiracial idea or somebody who's just the complete opposite of the last person who played the role. It's about really trying to make the thing, to reinvent it every time and get a cast that own the material as if it's never been done before. And it's disastrous if we try and kind of copycat the last version of it.
Adrian, how does it affect you that they're featured performers primarily in the cast in terms of marketing the show along the way.
As Phyllida said, I mean, Abba is very much the star, and also Catherine's story, the love story, the mother-daughter relationship is a huge selling point. This is a very feel-good, happy, positive musical. And that may sound very Pollyanna, but it's a really strong selling point when most big musicals tend to be incredibly gloomy. And I think you can't negate that factor at all. And we make stars out of people in shows. The exposure and the reviews they get, they become stars. And also, as Phyllida said, we do have people who have great Broadway pedigree who are getting that attention that you'd expect to get. But no, I think it's a very good point. You don't necessarily need to have a star in a musical to make it very successful.
And our mother and daughter are making their Broadway debut, which is very exciting.
Which gives you some more copy.
Yeah, which is great. I mean, we have two extraordinary Canadians in the lead, and that's exciting.
I'd like to go back to the nitty-gritty. Do you have a lot of investors? Do you have a whole group of investors? Who do you call upon?
No, it's not a huge group. It's probably kind of up to about 8 investors, main investors. But then also on Broadway we have some Broadway investors. In Australia we have some Australian investors. So, but it's quite a tight-knit investment group.
So you don't have the $10,000 investor
No.
in your show and a collection of those. You have solid people. The initial investment was your original company, and then you've augmented it for financing in each of the places you've been.
Yes, we set up a limited company for every show.
Before we break for questions, I just want to be able to thank you for the music, and on behalf of all of us here, and I think that that should be a roll cue for our studio there. So maybe we can get a look at "Thank You for the Music" before we go into the first question. Do you suppose that they've got that ready for us? That's
Thank you for the music, the songs I'm singing. Thanks for all the joy they're bringing. Who can live without it? I ask in all honesty. What would life be without a song or dance? What are we? So I say thank you for the music, for giving it to me. So I say thank you for the music, for giving it to
Are we ready for our first question?
Good afternoon. I'm Darren Polito. This question is for Phyllida. Due to the popularity and the familiarity of ABBA songs, was most of the cast already familiar with them, and how did that affect the rehearsal process? Did it make it any easier? Or?
In Europe, everybody knows the songs really well, and so the cast were very familiar with them and became addicted to them very quickly. But I wouldn't say that it's necessary to know the songs to be able to work on or enjoy the show. No, I think it's... But happily, most of the people we've worked with have been very keen on ABBA.
But you didn't look for it. In other words, you weren't looking for people, as you
No.
say. They weren't musical theater people, but they also were not ABBA fans that you were looking for.
But people who are able to sing, it is a different style of singing, isn't it? And maybe you should talk a little bit about that,
Yes.
because you're very...
That was something that I considered very, very important in the beginning, the outset, that we should use the pop idiom that we and every other pop group in the world does, where MT, as we said earlier, musical theatre, sometimes can make that very difficult for people to sing that way. So everyone that comes in, every principal especially, has to go through that process of finding and knowing what pop idiom is. And if they can't, then they're impossible.
What is it?
What is it? It's something you hear. You know, it's listen to to an album, listen to one of our songs, and you can hear it sung that way, and then you can hear the difference when someone from too much musical theatre sings it. So it's just an instinct and a feeling. I know exactly what it is, but how to explain it, I don't.
I mean, singing on the beat's one of the things you're very
Oh yes, yes.
fanatical about, aren't you?
In some places, yes. Some songs, like a disco song or a rock song, or a pop song, you need to sing on the beat and be very, very, very exact. Whereas musical artists, theatre artists, usually, are dragging it behind and sort of doing what they like with it. And that's the difference. Sometimes they can do that here as well, but not all the time, which they want to do sometimes.
But did you find that it was more difficult casting in America for those people?
Oh, no. It's been the same everywhere.
First of all, I want to say I am a huge ABBA fan. My idea of heaven is being in a car and listening to ABBA music. My sister saw the show in Boston, and she asked me, how come the songs were listed alphabetically and not in show order?
Adrian, are you responsible for that?
Well, Judy, you should answer that.
Well, that's because in London, in the first week of previews, we traditionally listed in the playbill, or programme as it's called in London, the songs in scene order, as they always are in a musical programme. But we discovered in the first few previews that the audience was singing along before the number started on stage. So we decided we should list them alphabetically.
Has it reduced them, the singing? I mean, they're instantly recognizable.
No, I think it's given more fun and pleasure to the audience because they can guess the songs. And I mean, even the musical director, when he's conducting, we've had to take off the title of the song on his score because the audience in the front row can see it coming. I hope he knows which song we're playing.
It does make it a little awkward for someone who isn't totally familiar with ABBA music to be looking there and saying, now, which number is this? And you have to run down the playbill and say, there's the one. It says honor there. That's the one I know. Then it starts with that.
But it's, as Judy says, it's part of the fun to guess what's going to come now, so I think it would be wrong to give that away.
Probably makes it difficult for the critics to look for what is the last number so I can gather my things and rush out.
Exactly.
Of course, they're cheated out of a 10-minute encore at least, which is whose idea was the encore, the extended encore that we have in the show?
I don't know.
It's grown, I have to say. We were always going to reprise a couple of the songs, but we have a little surprise at the very end, which there was a Puritan faction, which in fact was Björn and I think, who were not going to allow it to grow to the excesses it has done, but we finally lightened up.
Yes.
Well, I think the audience is grateful for that, the mini concert that we get.
Yes, Jim.
Hi, my name is Gerard Mullen. I have a question for your wonderful press agent, Adrian Bryan-Brown. Actually, a comment first. Adrian Bryan-Brown, will you add an A to the another word with an A to it at the end so that you can become Abba?
I'll work on it.
The question is, I saw the show in London, and in London, every week on Sunday night, one of the clubs has an Abba night. Are you thinking of anything like that for marketing and promotion?
No, I mean, there will be a lot of promotional activities happening, and they have been happening on the tour around the country. Because there is a huge ABBA fan base, which is not the primary audience. The primary audience is very smart theatre goers who buy their tickets now. But there are huge ABBA fan clubs all over the country, and there are people who love ABBA music. So, it's very much part of the campaign to raise awareness that way too.
This is for the panel. Are there any differences between the various productions? And what are they?
We work on the text. I mean, the idea is to make the production very personal to the territory we're in. So when the show opened in Toronto, we'd worked on it to establish it that the three women, Donna and the Dynamos, came from Canada. They came from Toronto. And then it was reworked again for Australia, and it's been reworked again for Broadway. We want the people of the city that the show's playing in to feel that it's their show. So it's not a British show that you'll be seeing, it's a New York show.
I have a question for the panel. Where do you go from here? Is there a life after Mamma Mia for you? What's happening? What's your next project?
Well, I think that, Bjorn, you can tell
Well,
about the life we know about.
Right in the middle of reviving chess, actually. We'll be doing that in Swedish this time in Stockholm early next year.
Had it never been in...
No, it's never been in Sweden.
And do you usually play in Swedish? Mamma Mia
No,
wasn't played there.
Mamma Mia, if it ever comes to Sweden, I think has to be translated, or it can come for a short run on a tour.
Right.
But with chess, the object is to look upon it as a full production, but also as a workshop. Because if it works in Stockholm, it probably works everywhere else. We have revised the story, I should add. That's why we're doing it, because we have quite a few changes in the story.
But
so that's what I'm doing at the moment.
But it certainly
And
was
all of you?
very success. Certainly was worthy of more success than it met in New York, and I think we're
Yeah,
gonna
that's
look
what I
for it
feel
again.
too. So I don't want to give it up yet.
Well, I think you're right in that. I think we all share that view that you're right
Great.
in that. Phyllida, what's on your platter?
Well, there's Wagner's Ring Cycle. But,
Seems very logical to follow.
well, it's another story about lost parents, so it is really. And I hope to go on being, involved with Mamma Mia for longer, a lot longer. Maybe not, directing these big first-class productions, but there's life in it yet, isn't there?
Where will you do the Ring Cycle?
At the English National Opera in London.
Does it? How does it affect when you personally, when you move from something as the classics to ABBA to the Ring Cycle? In terms of, did one energize the other, or do you just automatically switch gears?
It's the same. It really is the same thing. It's just making stories and trying to help the performers. It's not really a different world, apart from the electronic help.
But it's the same magic of the theatre
It's
in
the
any
same.
one of those for you.
Yes, and all of us who are working on Mamma Mia, we've come from, as Catherine was saying at the beginning, the world of subsidised theatre, not commercial theatre. So the colleagues we're working with on Mamma Mia, they're all part of that sort of so-called straight theatre and opera world. So in that sense, it feels quite continuous.
But the opera world doesn't look disdainfully upon you when they learn that you've just come from ABBA.
They're very jealous. They're all in awe of it. They love it. Yes.
And the ABBA people, they must be terribly respectful when they know that you've just done something classic.
For about 5 minutes.
I get less one. Well, your future, can you foresee a future beyond ABBA at this point? Have you got time to see one?
Not at the moment. It's a big Mamma Mia future, which I'm very happy with, because we're going to be opening a second US tour in February, so there'll be 2 tours on Broadway. There'll be 6 first-class productions by then, and then the end of next year we'll be working on foreign language licenses with Japan and Holland, and hopefully more after that. So there will be other projects, and Catherine and I have talked about films and other musicals and things, and actually it's quite funny because one thing Catherine always says is, if we're going to do a musical again, can I write the book first?
Adrian, I don't think it's fair to ask you what's on your platter. You're the largest.
It's easy. I will never work on anything else again.
You are the largest press office in New York City.
As I said, well, I'll never work on anything else.
Well, one thing I'm sure you're going to say is that it's the best show.
It is absolutely the best show I've ever worked on.
And Catherine?
I'm doing a couple of screenplays at the moment. So
Pardon?
I'm doing a couple of screenplays at the moment, so I've moved away from theatre a bit.
Is there a screen version of ABBA on the horizon at any point?
There's been a lot of interest, but we're not taking it any further at the moment. We're so concentrated on getting the first-class productions up, and that's where our kind of heart and focus is. But there has certainly been Hollywood interest.
But I'm very old-fashioned when it comes to that. I think that a musical should have its life and then perhaps become film, not before.
Once again, I have to interrupt you. This has been such a wonderfully exciting panel, and I thank you so much for being here. This has been an American Theatre Wing seminar on working in the theater, and our panel today has been on the wonderful production, Mamma Mia, the exciting musical that is now on Broadway. And on our panel, the people that made it all happen. I can't tell you how happy I am to have you here. This is the American Theatre Wing seminar on working in the theater. It's coming to you from the Center of the University of New York and Broadway, and I want to thank everybody again for being here. Thank you so much.
I was cheated by you, and I think you know when.